Good evening, everybody. Mic check 1 2. Hopefully the music is not drowning me out. I decided to sit down with a glass of can't talk now. Sit down with a glass of whiskey, which apparently is already getting to me. So it's going to be a fun stream. Well, look at that number. To say that we're blown away is an understatement. I mean, just look at that number. It's huge. We never imagined it would go that high that quickly. We hit 50% in just a little smidge over 24 hours, which was amazing. And hopefully it'll continue like that, and then we'll get funded quite soon. But yeah, it's super, super exciting, and I cannot thank everyone enough for the support. It's just huge, absolutely huge. And oh my god, hello 1142, you have the honor of being our first ever super chat, so well done you, thank you. We only got YouTube Partner a week ago, and we weren't actually sure whether or not the super chats and things worked, but apparently they do, so yay. Yeah, legit, you are literally the first person to ever super chat us, so yeah, you can mark that one down in history. Moots, I'm drinking Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey from a Jack Daniel's glass. I suppose that's technically not a real whiskey, but it tastes nice, so I drink it. Okay, so what are we doing this evening? Yeah, I did definitely underestimate the community, massively. Like I said, we're just so blown away by how much that's gone up in such a short period of time. It's beyond our wildest dreams, and as I think it was Leosh that said, yes, we are now a game studio, like a legit game studio. It's no longer just, you know, me and Claire working out of our house as indie devs. You know, we're on our way to being an actual studio, with, you know, actual people that we're paying to do stuff. And yeah, that's just a dream come true. And I can't wait to start bringing on additional developers and say, right, you've got a job to do and you've got a job to do. And, you know, that will free me up to, you know, work on the things that I find really exciting, like the galaxy and like the ship simulation stuff. And, you know, I can get people to work on the character system, which, one, I'm not very good at, and two, I don't particularly enjoy. So it's going to be great to be able to take on those developers and give them jobs to do. So yeah, that's pretty amazing. So tonight I'm going to be working more on the sensors. They do work now, but they need polishing. So I think what I'll do is I'll start with just giving it another quick check, just to kind of remind myself where we got to. I think it's well, I think what has overwhelmed us more than anything else, like obviously the response has been insane, but just the sheer amount of comments and questions. Myself and Claire, we've been literally answering questions and replying to things for like 24 hours straight. It's been non-stop. It's been crazy, which is good. It's a lovely problem to have, but wow, yeah, it's been crazy. It's been a whirlwind. I think this is also the most people we've ever had on stream, so that's cool as well. Everyone can meet Steve. Say hi to Steve, everyone. So, for the newcomers that haven't seen the new sensor system, it's almost the same as before, except it's been simplified a little bit in terms of what the buttons do. The galactic positioning does what it did before, except you've now got the ability to zoom in and out. So you can actually focus in on galactic regions of interest. You can change where that is. So if you want to, say, have a look at like what's over there, you can focus on that specific region, and it will now tell you about what that galactic region contains, including its stellar population. We don't have any of these guys in the game yet, but that's where they will be. So right now we've just got from O to M, and the rest are still to be added. Yeah, and then if we maybe do 15,000, you can see that we now have a different description about that structure of the galaxy and a different population. And the way that I'm envisioning this is that you'll be able to scan ahead for sectors of interest. And for example, we know that there's a black hole in that sector. We don't know anything about it, but we know that there is one. So it just kind of helps plotting courses, anywhere in the galactic space. No, so I took Steve off of the roof. He was up there looking through the window, but I knew that I'd forget that he was there and put a build out with him still there, so I got rid of him. Yeah, the holo display does actually update. If I am crouched down next to it, no, that's no good. Now you can't see. If I press these buttons, you can see that the holo display does update at the same time as the UI screen, all the way down to like can't see anything levels. We had a bit of an interesting thing, because when you're at 100,000 light years, which is the full width of the galaxy, it kind of makes sense to have it focused on the center of the galaxy with the ship moving. But when you zoom in a little bit, we now need to be able to zoom in where the ship is. So of course it can't be centered anymore. But it's useful to have it centered in this sense. So I might add some controls so that you can decide what you want to center the map on, whether it's the ship or the center of the galaxy, just to make that easier to work with. The only thing that I noticed isn't working right now is on this map here. If you click that to change the focal point from where the ship is to the manual location, the holo display isn't actually updating to reflect that one. So that's something which I will need to fix. But yeah, that's basically what that mode is for. And then on the long range, same as it is in game right now. This one you will be able to see from down here, but it's now a lot more granular. So you can go all the way down to 5 light years, and you can zoom out in much smaller increments, which looks kind of freaky. And what's different from before is the ability to turn on and off auto refresh. So at the moment, as you're flying through the galaxy, this list is continually updating, which is a bit of a pain if you're trying to find something. So you can turn off the auto update. And again, like the galactic position, you'll be able to pick a spot in the galaxy and then see in more detail what's there. So you can scan ahead to anywhere in the galaxy. So if you were to enter 50-50-50, for example, you would see Saj on the list, like from Earth. So you can block courses to any star or indeed planet, anywhere in the galaxy. We might limit that in terms of how far you can see planets, but you'll certainly be able to see all the stars in the galaxy on this mode, and just no details about any of the orbiting planets. Keller asks, will we be able to toggle off the Headbob? Yeah, so you can actually do that already. So if you press C, you can see that Headbob is now off, and you can also go into third person and selfie mode like that. So there's different camera modes. What we will be doing though is we'll be making the no Headbob mode the default. So you'll have to press C to turn Headbob on, just to make it easier. Glenn asks, wondering if a drag slider for zooming might be nicer than multi-clicks. Yes, I think in the long term, definitely, that's what we'll have. But making sliders work in multiplayer is a bit of a pain, because you need to be able to update the slider position when it updates, and then send that to clients. But not have it then also update for the host or the person that's moving it. It makes it really sticky to move in multiplayer, and you've got an issue where, and I think this is just a native Unreal thing, if you hold the left mouse button when you move a slider, if you move like off the edge of the widget, it resets the slider, and it's just usably awkward. It's easier if you just hold E, obviously, and use the mouse, like this one, for example. You can just hold E and do that. But if I hold left click and do it, it does weird stuff. It's not particularly smooth, whereas that is much easier, or mouse wheel. But yes, we will look at having a slider eventually. Oni Noni asks, how is the list sorted? Yes, it is sorted by distance. And this is sorted by distance to the ship. And when you use the manual focal point, that will be sorted by distance to the center of the sector. So it will assume that the ship is in the middle of the sector when you do that scan. Thanks, Grayson. Yeah, I'm generally doing 2 streams a week now anyway, and I'm going to try and maintain that if I can, because I actually quite enjoy doing the streams. As I said before, I don't get as much done in the streams because I'm generally waffling on about things, but a couple of times a week, it's nice just to share what I'm doing. Yeah, the data center is actually under the floor here, and there will be, at some point, an escape ladder kind of down here somewhere, so we'll be able to open a hatch and then climb down the ladder into the data center, so that if for any reason Like, I don't know, if the lounge at the back there had a hull breach, then you'd be stuck on the bridge. So there'll be an escape point down a ladder. Yes, you will be eventually able to explore the surface of planets. And actually, let's bring up a planet. Bing! There's one. So the way we're going to handle the planetary scanning side of things, and this is something which is literally hot off the press because I'm still working on it, but on the holo display you'll see, you know, a hologram of the planet, and there will be lots of points of interest which highlights on the surface. I'll have like a little label saying like Ayers Rock right there, wherever that is. Is Ayers Rock in Australia? Or am I getting that confused with a different one? Geography, clearly not my strong point. But yeah, so you'll have surface locations of interest that you can then target and send probes down to and such. When it comes to flying a shuttle down, you can either use one of those targets of interest as a shuttle target, or you can just fly down arbitrarily anywhere. So taking like the orbital distance that we're at now, you would have to physically fly all the way down to the edge of the atmosphere. And then when you hit a certain predefined altitude, there'll be a brief transition while the surface is loaded. And that transition will likely be, you'll be popped into third-person view. You'll see the shuttle zooming off towards the surface. There'll be a few seconds while it loads, and then you'll be back in control of the shuttle again, above the ground at that point that you entered the atmosphere at. And then you'll be free to fly around and look for somewhere to land. It would be lovely to do real-time planetary landings, but we made the call to not do that for quite a few reasons. One, because we're moving space around the ship rather than moving the ship through space, for lots of technical reasons. And two, if we have the surface as a separately loaded area, then we can absolutely pack it with content and have like lush rainforests and things, which we wouldn't be able to do if we were having real-time landings. So that's kind of the trade-off of having to have a transition. Will there be a set background history for the game's universe? Yes. So the general idea of the lore behind the game is that this particular ship, the Magellan class, is a prototype, which is why it's got this honking great ring around it. So this is the first ever human ship to be built specifically for deep space exploration. So the FTL technology is still in its infancy, and everything is big and clunky, nothing's been miniaturized yet. And this is very much an experimental mission to test the viability of deep space exploration. So that's why you're on this ship, that's the whole mission of why you're here. This is a one-off prototype. Our first DLC story, the actual story campaign itself, takes place on the Pathfinder class, which is built after this ship. So all the lessons that were learned sort of logistically and technologically from this ship go into the Pathfinder class, and that's the full proper deep space, humanity exploring the stars mission that gets publicized in the game's lore. Yes, the ring is spinning. Most of the ship is currently in construction because this is the new hull. Wrong chair. This is the new outer hull that I've been building. So we have a look from the outside. This actually uses an Alcubierre drive. So this is the actual ring. I'm still not entirely sold on the idea of the ring spinning, But if we do go with that, then they will spin faster depending on how high you've got the FTL drive turned up. It's quite cool, like having the ring. Obviously, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of ship missing right now. But yeah, it will be a ring ship. And the engineering section underneath there will extend down all the way to the ring. The gravity is actually generated by a series of coils around the bottom hull of the ship, and it creates a gravitational field for the whole vessel. And that uses an inverse square fall off, so the gravity on A deck is slightly less than the gravity on G deck. Yeah, the rings will only be spinning whilst the FTL drive's active. A bit like a Stargate, so you spin the rings up, then you go to FTL. It's a lore regarding how we came to get FTL. So FTL, as a technology in the game's lore, was developed slowly over time. So it wasn't just a sudden, "Ooh, now we've got FTL." It started off being sublight only, so we could get around a lot quicker by compressing space, but it wasn't compressed enough to achieve superluminal speeds. And then some scientific breakthroughs were made which allowed for better energy usage and more efficient compression of space, which was more of a math thing than a materials thing, and the way that the energy is generated on the ship and in the coils. So other than this ship, I think we're going to go with having a few not as fast of these missions to Alpha Centauri, sort of barely superluminal ships, and we'll encounter those as part of the story campaign. But yeah, this is the first ship that's fast enough to actually make deep space exploration viable. The Not Cool one asks, will most star systems be dead and empty, or will there be things to do in most systems? It's a difficult one because space generally is big and empty. Every system is going to be a fuel source. The ship is powered by deuterium and helium-3, and you'll gather those fuels by skimming the upper cloud layers of gas giants. Now, not all gas giants will be equal, and some will have a denser fuel source than others, whilst some might not have any helium in them at all. And so it doesn't matter what system you go to, there is going to be things to do there, be it literally just fuel and resource harvesting, or something else of interest. We're going to have things like wormholes, which will be procedurally generated all over the galaxy, spatial phenomena, space-based life forms around some planets, things that might be a ring system around a planet where a space-based life form has been managed to grow and survive. Any planet which is capable of generating liquid water will attempt to generate life in the code, and if that goes all the way up to a spacefaring civilization, then that civilization will be there, present in that system, or across multiple systems if they're old enough. So, yes, there is going to be a lot of barren rocks in the galaxy, because that's just how the galaxy is, but in between all those barren rocks, there should be a lot of alien life to look for and discover. And even with the barren rocks, I do want the geology of those planets to be interesting in their own right. So they're not just going to be flat, barren surfaces with a few hills here and there. I want chasms and caves and interesting geology to explore. And we're also going to hopefully have ground vehicles as well. So the shuttle should have a little bay in the back where you can open up and bring out a little buggy to drive around on. So anyone that's played Elite, driving an SRV around a planetary surface can be fun in itself. So things like that. Sorry guys, I'm just going through the chat. This is probably 4 or 5 times as many people as we've ever had on stream before, so there's a lot to keep up with. Glenn asks, are the main core functions you are coding things that will be shared in other ship models? How much additional work will be needed for future ship designs? Well, thankfully, I'll click on that so it's not lagging. Thankfully, once a core system is done, it's done across the board globally for all core systems, for all ships. So, like the electrical system and the fusion reactor, we can wrap any ship around that system. Like the cables and things. The cables can be routed anywhere. It doesn't matter, where they go. So we can add any number of ships once we've got the core code and the core systems polished, which is great. So we're doing all the hard work now, all the slow work building and polishing these systems, and then when they're all done, we can just keep churning out ships all the time. Gilherm asks, and sorry if I've butchered that name. I'm not very good at names. Gilherm Savoya. Will there be precursors that affected human history? Well, yes. One of the big plot lines in the game overall, and I'm going to try and avoid spoilers so Claire doesn't shout at me. But one of the things that the game will be covering is the origin of intelligent life on Earth. So, intelligent life and evolution has a bit of a missing link at the moment. That the fossil record has a gap. So, the question is, how did Homo sapiens become so intelligent versus other species on this planet? And the game is going to explore the idea that we had help, and finding out who that was and what other species were also helped is going to be sort of the main story in the first DLC campaign. Hopefully I explained that without giving anything away. Tin Blue asks, do the planets orbit their star? Not right now, no. All of the orbital data is there, however. If I hop over to here a second. Actually, I can't show you on this version because it's not there. But on the demo right now, you'll see that there's lots of orbital information over on here. And well, actually, I can show you on here. Oh, no, I can't because that's not working yet either. This is the downside of using a dev build that's kind of work in progress. So, yeah, so the orbits are all mathematically worked out. So, the inclination, the orbital period, all of that is already worked out for every planet in the game, but they're stationary in space. Now, the reason they're stationary right now is because in order for them to move, any orbiting ships and stations need to move with them. And that's going to mean moving their physics states. Because if you imagine there's a space station and you've got two ships fighting each other around that space station, then the space station, the ships, and any projectiles, all of that needs to move not only around the planet in an orbit, but also with the planet as the planet itself is orbiting the star. And that's a lot of stuff to code and add to the game. So right now, all the star systems are literally static in space, but that won't always be the case. So the way we're going to handle it is that the distance above the planetary surface you are will determine the orbital speed that you're orbiting at. So we'll calculate what speed is required for a equatorial, perfectly circular orbit. And if you're above or below the equator, we'll angle the inclination of that orbit accordingly. So the closer to the planet you are, the more quickly you will orbit around it. And obviously the further away you get, you'll keep getting slower and slower and slower until you hit the Hill sphere, in which case you won't be orbiting at all. The edge of the Hill sphere, rather. And the way it will handle the actual orbiting is it will take a snapshot of the physics states and then teleport those physics states along a spline which we draw equal to the circular orbit. So I know how we're going to do it, we just need to get to the point of actually doing it. Mike asks, any insight on what the medical gameplay will look like? So, gameplay on a per department basis is going to all be based around task lists. So each department will have its own list of tasks which need to be completed. And so taking medical as the example, you will have patients which will naturally be coming in and out of the medical facility. And when those patients are assigned to a bed, there will be a task generated to either speak to them, find out what's wrong with them, use a tool to, look at a leg injury. And as things are done in relation to that patient, more and more tasks will be generated on the task list. And then the players, all the NPCs, will work basically top down from that task list. So as more tasks are generated, whoever's available will just pick them up. In terms of what will you actually be doing as like a medical officer, we will have I guess if you've seen the Passengers movie, they've got a medical bed which can practically do everything, and we'll have something similar to that. So we'll have a dedicated room for complex surgeries where the patient will lay on the bed, and then you'll select what procedure you want to perform from a list, and the skill involved there is knowing which of those procedures match whatever the ailment happens to be, and then the machine itself will carry out that procedure. So it's not going to be like Surgeon Simulator in space. That aside, when it comes to diagnosing people, there will be handheld tools that you can wave at them, and it will tell you whether they've got a temperature or whether or not there's a bacterial infection or like a foreign body that is detected. So it's use a tool, find out what's wrong, and then either provide a medication or take them to the medical table and have that do the actual surgery itself. And that's basically how all the different departments will work. So like engineering, for example, if something breaks, a task will be generated for it to be fixed, and then either the player or an NPC will go pick up that task. If you're the chef, you'll have people that want food, and that will become a task. So the whole thing's going to be task driven. And as the player, you could, if there's enough NPCs surviving on your ship, you could just let them do it all and you could ignore the tasks. If you want to be more involved and have more to do, then you can grab the tasks yourself. We're hoping that can be more of an optional thing, so we're not forcing players to be stuck in this loop of completing tasks. So, if they're bored, they can complete tasks. If they'd rather be sitting in the bar, they can do that instead. Momoto asks, when will we get a tech demo update? Well, right now, I'm working on the sensors. As you can see, they're kind of working and not at the same time. So we've got the data there, but we're not generating information. So I've still got a fair bit of work to do to get this polished and working and presented nicely. Once this bit's done, I think this is finished over here, yeah, so we can now turn the holo display on and off, which is what a lot of people have been asking for. Yeah, and that aside, the big job really is sorting out the lighting, because there's a few lighting issues that need fixing, and that should come with it a fairly good FPS increase, I hope, because we've really reduced the shader complexity from the lighting, so that will be nice for the demo updates. And then obviously this, so there's a lot of ship missing which needs to be built in, and I'm hoping to get all of this done before the end of Kickstarter, so that we can use the demo update as, you know, a bit of a boost for the Kickstarter to get interest kind of drummed up again. How much of that I'll get done in the next 3 weeks or so is a good question, because these things always take longer than you expect. But I'm not going to wait until the full hull is finished and polished before putting a build out. For the most part, we just need the sensors to be flawless and bug-free. If they're polished and working perfectly, then I'll be happy to put a build out, as long as we've got at least a placeholder ship around the unfinished bits. Glenn asks, I assume that the game assumes that with the Alcubierre drive concept you are bypassing any time dilation issues. Basically, yes. I've had this discussion with people before about time dilation and how that affects an Alcubierre drive. But the whole point of the drive is that the ship isn't physically moving faster than the speed of light. Within its own reference frame, it's essentially stationary. To an external observer, you'll see it move off at a superluminal speed, but because space-time itself is expanding and being contracted, it's a conveyor of space-time. But that doesn't actually have any time dilation issues, because it's a different reference frame. Does that make sense? I'm probably explaining it badly. But yeah, the ship isn't moving faster than the speed of light. Space-time is stretching faster than the speed of light. No differently than how galaxies are currently moving away from us faster than the speed of light, because the expansion of the universe is now superluminal on the outer edges of the universe. Same concept. Gilherm asks, is there a team specifically for the development of the game's lore? Not yet, it's just me, but yes, there will be. If you're familiar with Drew Wager, the author, who also worked on Elite Dangerous, he's very interested in creating some lore for the game. And absolutely, we'll be speaking to him more about that. I think the way we're going to approach it is, because we've got a whole galaxy, and the whole galaxy is going to have probably probably not hundreds of thousands, but at least tens of thousands of alien civilizations, depending on procedurally whether or not they get generated as such. But we can give people like Drew an entire star system or an entire sector and say, right, that's yours, that's your sector. Whatever plot lines and stories you want to create in that sector, that's all yours. Feel free, go for it. We'll produce a writer's bible in terms of the technology in the game generally, so there's not anything too outside of the realms of what the game's trying to accomplish. But yeah, for the most part, any author we engage to write stories can have free reign within the bit of the galaxy that we give them. And the galaxy is a big place, so there can be a lot of authors. And that's good for for the player as well, because if you think about, an author and their style and their method of story writing, it's likely quite different from the next author. So, one author as part of the galaxy is going to have a very different feel to it to a different author's part of the galaxy. So as you're exploring, it's going to be a very different feel and a very different story to what you're encountering. And I'm quite excited about that. Getting people involved to flesh out the galaxy like that with life and proper stories and proper histories. I'm still getting through the questions. There's still quite a few. Bear with me. Mike's asking about the vertical bar in the windows. Yes, so right, this bar here, I originally added this because it made the ship look better from the outside, but in hindsight, it's really in the way, and I find myself crouching and trying to see a planet, and I can't because that stupid thing's in the way. So yeah, it's going. I will be getting rid of that. And the original ship design that we did yonks ago didn't have that crossbar, and it just had like an up and over panoramic window, and I'll be going back to that design again. It probably won't be straight like this, but yeah. So I'll keep these ceiling windows here because I think they're nice, and we'll keep that shape as it goes around here. So we'll have a consistent shape around the rim, but these front three windows will not have the crossbar, and I will get rid of that bit in the middle and make that a window as well. And then the hollow projector will actually be a ring of projection heads all around, all projecting inward towards the middle. And this will just be a nice window, which is nice because that gives me more space to work with there for the display as well. And it'll be quite nice here having the window above, especially when you've got the display turned off. And then you've got a really lovely view out here as well. But that's on my very, very long to-do list. I was hoping to do that as part of the outer hull updates, but if I do manage to do it for that, then it will be the last thing I do, because it's more important to get the ship itself done first. Gilherm also asks, is it possible to upgrade the systems, for example from a wired electrical system to a Star Trek-like electroplasma system? You won't be able to change the type of system on the ship in terms of how it works, but you will be able to upgrade the materials. So give an electrical cable as an example. Right now they're copper, just standard copper electrical cables. You might find a raw material on some planet somewhere which is a much better room temperature conductor, so you can then 3D print new cables that have much better conductivity, much higher tolerances to heat and damage. They could be stronger, so they're less likely to break during combat. So then you 3D print a new cable, go to the one you want to replace, remove it, and then put a new cable there. And that pretty much applies to every ship system. So all of them will be upgradable in the same manner. So either you find a bit of alien tech, maybe, which might be better at the job, or a new material, which you'll unlock through the Material Sciences Lab on SeaDeck. Glenn asks, I remember Frontier Development saying that caves on their planets were difficult or impossible because of their engine for surface textures. Is that less of an issue with your dev environment? Yes. I've got two different approaches to generating planetary surfaces. There is a really, really good volumetric system that I might try using, so we can have a voxelized world. And if we can do it voxelized in a way that's performant, then we would definitely approach it that way. In which case we can have really impressive caverns and caves with overhanging rocks, and completely do that with 3D noise in a voxelized way. The problem with that is it takes a lot more to generate that, and it's fine at surface level, but if you're in a shuttle flying over that surface, then that needs to be generated chunk by chunk further and further away. So it might not prove to be possible. But what we can do, if that is not possible, is we'll use just a height mesh. So the same as the way Elite does it, the same as the way Star Citizen do it. They just have a height mesh, and if they want caves, you just punch a hole in the height mesh, and then have a physical mesh of a cave, which could be procedurally generated. Starfield do the same. I'm not quite sure why Elite couldn't do that, because all you need to do is, if you think of the planetary surface as a blanket draped over a bunch of rocks, it gives you that contour and shape. All you need to do is just cut a hole in the geometry where you want the cave entrance to be, and then plonk in a 3D mesh of a cave. I mean, going back to World of Warcraft, that's how they do it too. So that's our fallback solution. If we can't voxelize the terrain, then we will do it that way. Ancient aliens confirmed, yeah. Well, talking of ancient aliens, my favourite sci-fi show of all time is Babylon 5, and I love the way they handle aliens in Babylon 5. They're a lot more diverse than say Trek, for example, and that's the approach we're taking with this. So if you think about the full spectrum of how old a planet could be and how long a race might have been on that planet for, I mean, they could have been there as a technological society for tens of thousands of years before we even got to space. So, what does that species look like? What does their technology look like? What do they do? And that's what we're going to have in the game. So, we will have, it's like First Ones style aliens, which are massively ancient, and they'll either completely ignore you or squish you like a bug. Ethan Films asks, do you use origin rebasing to calculate large distances to avoid the floating point error? Sort of. If you look at the sensors here, you can see we've got two. Hang on, let's target Earth a minute. So we've got a galactic XYZ, which is the light year grid for the whole galaxy. But we've also got this local XYZ, and the local XYZ is the real space. That's relative to the actual world origin. So right now, we are literally that far in kilometers from the world origin. Not the interior of the ship, but the exterior. And there is a copy of the ship which flies around, which you can't see, it's invisible, and the galaxy outside moves in accordance to where that ship is. So right now we do actually have some floating point issues on planetary surfaces where the textures jiggle around as you move, and that's because of this. We are using 64-bit large world coordinates, which thanks to UE5 we can now do, and that gives us about, I can't remember how far it was now, quite a few AU's worth of distance before floating point errors start to creep in. But yes, it is an issue, and the way we handle it is by never letting the ship get further than half a light year away from the origin point. If you imagine the galaxy as a series of cubes, then as the ship's flying through those cubes, it's constantly being teleported to the opposite side of the cube when it hits an edge. So you're either going towards the world origin or away from the world origin. And then as you enter a cube that has a star system in it, that star system will then load. And that's driven by these coordinates here. So the game knows whether or not there is a star system in those coordinates, and it will then load that accordingly. My future plan, which is something I'll be implementing when I do all the sublight stuff, which obviously we've got no RCS or anything yet, so when the sublight flight is implemented, then space is going to be handled very differently. And what will happen then is, rather than space all moving in accordance to a single anchor point, every object in the system will manage its own location, and it will calculate its own offset based on where the ship should be. So as you get closer to a planet, it is then physically moving closer to the world origin, because the world origin is actually right there in the middle of the bridge. So that's the 000 point in the world. Because the ship interior never moves. We move space around the ship to simulate spaceflight. Because there's no way you could move this. It's just, it's a ship full of actors and physics objects. That's not moving anywhere. I hope that makes sense. A couple of you pointed out the Kickstarter. Let me just have a quick look. Where are we? Oh, yeah, there it goes. Wow. Yeah, that's just... Every time I look at it, I just think to myself, that's mental. I can't believe how quickly that's gone up. So cool, thank you. Radislav mentions that consoles and things explode in Star Trek. Yeah, I think the explanation behind that was the fact that they use the electroplasma system, and then you've got the EPS taps in the consoles. So you've got highly energized plasma going directly into a keyboard, essentially, which sounds like a really bad design choice. So yeah, these guys are relatively low voltage and will not be exploding. As fun as it is to have consoles exploding when you're in combat, they won't be exploding because that's just not very realistic. The holo display could explode because that's like super high voltage, but these won't. More to Know Show asks, curious about damage modelling. Will the ship console show cracks and fracturing? Yeah, that stuff definitely. So even though they won't explode, they will break. So you can have a completely trashed helm console with wires hanging out of it and completely broken and unusable, and it will remain unusable until an engineer comes and fixes it. Similarly, every single one of these white wall panels will come off and break, and we're probably better off looking downstairs for that. Here's an example of one of the lighting issues I mentioned. So as you can see, that's not normal. So yeah, so taking a corridor panel as an example, this whole panel is going to be completely breakable. So if you shoot it with a weapon, or there's external damage that has a damage sphere that reaches this far into the ship, then that could be completely destroyed, revealing the metalwork behind it. You have things like access panels which will break and fall off, and the whole interior will be damageable. All the lights will smash, and we've already tested that before. which was quite cool. So you could smash the lights and the NPCs would come and fix them. So that sort of thing. The carpets right now are like one solid piece, but I'm going to make it so they are actually segmented like the walls are, and then each one of those will be individually damageable. And if the floor's broken, then you'll see the the bolts and the metalwork and things revealed behind them when they're smashed. Each one of these obviously also has their own health value. So the lower the health value goes, the more tatty they'll look. Same with the carpets. They'll get tattier over time, and part of the janitor role will be to run some kind of floor tool over them, which will restore them back to optimal condition. But it's, we want that kind of deep interaction within the ship, where if you stop looking after it, it will get tattier and tattier and look like a student flat. So just scrolling down the chat again. Anomalous Bites points out that we've had a bunch of people in the chat calling this a typical scam, or this isn't a real game. I don't know what to say to that really, other than look, here it is, it's a game, and there's a demo for free on Steam that anyone can play. So I think anyone calling it a scam obviously hasn't bothered to look into it at all. It's just it's on Kickstarter, therefore it must be a scam, which is not the case. Random Roger asks if you can have planetary explosions, will there be ground vehicles? Yeah, that is the intention. Planets are big, and walking around one will take ages, so I'm probably going to make multiple different types of shuttle. You'll have just plain old passenger shuttles, which you would use to get between the ship and, say, a station or another ship. But when going down to the surface, it would be nice to have one which is a little bit more like a cargo truck. So it would have a cargo area in the back where you could put in an SRV or something like that, like a little buggy to explore on, like the NASA moon buggies that explore the moon, something like that. And take that down to the surface, unload it from the shuttle, and then just drive around exploring. And again, once that works as a system, we can add an infinite number of different styles of ground vehicle, as long as they physically fit in the back of the shuttle. Glenn asks, is there an auxiliary control bridge or control panels that can take over in an emergency if the bridge controls are destroyed? Yeah, so obviously this is the main bridge, but if I debug teleport downstairs, someone's trashed engineering. I've expanded the gap between all the decks, so if you look here, you can see between the decks. That's another thing that needs fixing. But oh yeah, and that wall. So where this wall now is, this is going to be the engineering control room. An engineering control runs over 2 decks and will have a holo display just like the one on the bridge. So you'll be able to completely control the ship from the engineering control room. So all of the ship bridge functions can all be transferred to the engineering controls, and that becomes your emergency bridge, essentially. I'm not sure whether we'll have a view screen in there or not. Probably not, for performance reasons. So it'll be a data-driven, holo display-driven flight. Leosh asks, what will be new excluding the sensors? Yeah, I guess the big thing is the restructuring of the ship. So, I've now that we have nanites enabled, I've adding more detail to all the metal work. Some of these are in the wrong place, they just need shifting around. The whole ship has got fatter because of the space between each deck. Like if we go up the stairs here, you can see that there's now a step there, so the stairs need expanding. I think it was probably C deck where I had made the biggest change. So C deck has an entirely new layout completely. So this is all new on C deck. And if I go around, so there's a large room here now where you're going to have windows all the way around here. There's going to be a big window in the ceiling there, and this here is actually going to be a big spiral staircase with some kind of large planter in the middle of it, maybe with a tree going up through the middle, and then there will be a platform either side with chairs and tables and things, and that will be the same on both sides of C deck. And if I quickly hop into the external camera, that is, let's pitch down, light it up a bit. That's these wing sections here. So where the wings kind of go across to the ring, that's where there will be circular windows in the ceiling on both sides, and those staircases will go all the way down through, all the way through to the bottom of E deck. The new ship is different in so many ways. Like this nose bit that sticks out here, that's going to have windows in it, ceiling windows again, and underneath there will be a mall type area where you'll have a central wide space with seating and planters, and then either side of that you'll have all the crew facilities, like the main mess hall, the medical facility, a gym, a bar, entertainment and all that sort of stuff. So all the city centre stuff, even a small cinema. And then at the very front of the ship will be the park, which will have the big windows and all the grass and the trees and a little water feature. So it's going to be, a lot longer than it is currently in the demo, with a lot more in it. Functionality-wise, I think the only new functionality really is the sensors stuff. I can't remember anything else I've added. It's all been construction work. But as part of this, when you go to the short-range sensors, now that we actually have the ability to view planets in 3D, we will start generating the code for the life on the surface of that world. So as of this sensor console being finished, there will be life in the galaxy. So we can start to get an idea of what that's going to look like in terms of advanced civilizations. So we can start looking at the numbers of how often are advanced civilizations cropping up in the galaxy. And that's going to be really exciting to get that done. It's going to be based on so many different factors. And this is why I likened it to the Drake equation, because we're going through and generating stuff procedurally using astrophysics, and if a planet has liquid water, then we'll try and generate life. Because we're doing it in that way, we should have a natural distribution of alien life, and because we're basing the technological level of that life based on the age of the planet that it exists on, again, it's going to be a very realistic distribution of intelligent life in the galaxy. And I literally have no idea how common life is going to be until I implement that code. And that's one of the things about this that I get really excited about. Just doing those data points and just seeing how common is life in the galaxy based on these criteria, based on these variables. How often does life develop? That's our attempt at the Drake equation. Sorry, I don't keep I didn't mean to keep bringing up Kickstarter, so every time I alt-tab to the chat it comes up. I need to answer these questions more quickly, sorry guys. Thank you, Claire, for jumping in and answering some of these for me. Seraph Armoros asks, is there going to be a bowling alley? Yes. Yes, there will be a bowling alley. I think we're finally getting to the bottom of that now. Leosh asks, are we going to have physical buttons for engineering? Yeah, right now, the only reason we don't have physical buttons is actually because of VR. I wanted everything to be immediately usable in VR, and that means by using widget panels, I can just put a widget interaction component on the fingertips of the VR controller, so you can literally stab at buttons in VR with your finger. And that's much more straightforward than interacting with a physical physics object within the game world. Long term, yes, we will have a lot more physical controls in the world, but we want to do it so that using VR and using first person works the same. So we want those two experiences to be as close together as they can be. So, if in VR you can walk up and pull a lever, then we want that to be just as fluid and just as physical in the first-person gameplay as well. And that's partly actually why I want to take on a character developer specifically as probably our first hire. So if we assume that Kickstarter is going to succeed, and we have enough, which is actually the first stretch goal. So our first stretch goal is to have enough money to be able to employ a character specialist. And the reason I want a character specialist specifically is to build the full IK system for VR to dramatically improve the character system we've got, because, let's face it, it's clunky. And to do things like implement variable gravity direction, and all of the stuff which would improve the user experience is all really kind of connected to the whole character system, because the character system is how you interact with the game. So yeah, that's the first hire I want to make. The Not Cool One asks, do you plan on having content during downtime? Yeah, so things like the bowling alley, for example, good example. There's going to be things like a small basketball court. We want to implement a sports bar type thing where you've got like pool tables and stuff. I'm not sure how well we're going to be able to implement a pool table, but I'm going to try. But again, we want things that work in VR just as well as first person. So things that involve physics, like chucking a basketball or using a bowling alley, those things are easy to cross over between VR and first person. I don't know, things like a crazy golf putting course, something like that. If it's a physics-based activity, then I'll probably try and get it in there. And then we'll have things like a table with a chess set on it that you can use. So, the NPC crew, when they're not on shift, will be partaking in those activities. Getting to the point where you could challenge an NPC to a game of pool, I think that's a long, long way in the future. But, that's the kind of thing that I would probably look at doing if there weren't any other pressing concerns. I just noticed we've got Mal and Crispy in the stream. Hi guys, nice to see you. Gilherm's got a good question about alien life. Is advancement solely based on age, or are there factors such as gravity, or being in a world with no fire, etc.? Yeah, so at a very basic level, the age of the planet, and I'm using Earth as our reference point here because it's literally the only one we have. So I've looked at how long it took life on Earth to reach certain development milestones, and how long it took for intelligent life to naturally develop on Earth, and plus or minus a percentage, that's kind of the benchmark I'm using with the exoplanets as to how developed life on those worlds will be. So if that exoplanet is younger than Earth, then the chances are it won't have life as developed as humans, or current humans. Obviously, intelligent Homo sapiens haven't been around very long at all. It's only a few tens of thousands of years versus the couple of billion years that the planet's been around. And that gives you such a wide margin for development, because a society even 1,000 years older than humanity is going to be so vastly different than we are now. So there's a lot of factors that need to be put into this, into the numbers to generate something reasonable. But back to your point about environmental factors. Yes, so different stars sort of come in different flavors, and like an M-class star, which I believe they're generally referred to as like flare stars, they have a lot of solar activity, a lot of sun flares, they have a lot of radiation output. M-class stars, for all that they are very small and not very hot, they are very, very active in terms of coronal ejections and things. So there's even an argument that an Earth-like world would be impossible around an M-class star for those reasons. So we'll certainly be taking that into account, and if we do have a habitable world around an M-class star, it's going to have to have ticked many boxes, and then the life on that world might be like super radiation resistant because they grew up in this really hostile environment. So yes, factors like that will be rolled into the generation. The Digital Scribe is asking about controllers. So the next update is going to focus on the sensors and the planetary scanning and the generation of alien life. The patch after that is where we're going to do full controller support and HOTAS support as well. And at the same time, sublight controls for the helm. That was the two main milestones I wanted to reach, in the next two patches. First, I wanted to generate life in the galaxy so we can start to see the numbers, and then I wanted to implement sublight controls, because once the ship is properly flyable sublight, then I can implement wormholes, and that's going to be cool as well. Because obviously right now when the ship's moving around, it's just FTLing everywhere. It's not moving anywhere sublight, and we need the ability to drift around and bump into things. So that's kind of when it's going to happen, and I'm guessing a couple of months off the top of my head. But all I can say is keep an eye on the Discord. Anyone that's on our Discord will tell you that we share and talk continuously. We overshare all the time. To say we're in open development is an understatement. Crispy asks, what are your plans for death in the game? From a combat or flying my ship into a moon? Will it be punishing? Yeah. So really, there's two things there, because the ship itself is a character, and then the crew are characters in their own right. And going back to the example of if you as the player are taking over an NPC, like you're an agent in the Matrix, so as soon as you log on, that NPC suddenly becomes you, then if that NPC then dies, that's one less person you can be, until if you keep dying as the player, then you're working your way through NPCs and killing them off one at a time, because I want the crew to be a finite resource, and keeping the crew alive is good for two reasons. One, because they've got jobs to do, and two, every time you die, you're losing an NPC. Now the ship itself, however, is different again. So if the ship dies, then everyone's dead. So if you were to fly into a star or a black hole, then that's it. The mission's over. That's a game over scenario. Slightly less extreme, if let's say you run out of food or water and you can no longer feed the crew, then over time they will start to get sick and then they will start to die off. Now, if you then can't find a food source, or let's say you run out of power and there's no way of repowering the ship, at that point you can either just stand around and wait for everyone to die, or you can initiate the self-destruct and just get it over and done with. In either scenario, that's a start a new game thing. That I like Frostpunk. Claire's a huge fan of Frostpunk. She plays it all the time. And one of the things they do when you inevitably lose is they give you this really cool story of like how your game went and what the milestones were. And I really like that, and I think we'll do something similar. So, if your ship is lost and you reach that game over point, then we'll do a similar thing where you'll have an overview of, you traveled this far, you met these many new species, you achieved this, you did this. And I think that would be nice to have to end the mission in a more of a positive way. And then you simply launch a new mission with a new ship and crew. But we want the crew to be meaningful. So that's another thing that we were talking about, is if you return to Earth to repair and refit with crew left over, then those crews should be valuable because they've already been on one mission with you. So you take on fresh new recruits, but we want those existing crew members to be more skilled and more valuable. So we'll look into ways of making them valuable, so that if you've got one crew member which has been on 5 missions with you, then you're going to get more and more invested in keeping that person alive because they're more and more valuable. The Digital Scribe says, HOTA support would be awesome. It would be good to see some complexity for Helm like you have in engineering. Yeah, the Helm is relatively old in terms of its design. Like the power draw there isn't connected to anything right now. So the FTL system is going to be a lot more buttony. So there'll be things like right now the coils are just spinning happily on their own, but there'll be a button for that. So when you spin up the FTL drive, you will be literally spinning up the FTL drive, and then you will engage the field coils, and it will tell you how much power is available, and it's also going to have a gravity-based disturbance system as well. So we want to make it so that a straight line is not necessarily the fastest point from A to B.
if the gravity well of a star affects the ability of the FTL to maintain its coherency, because you are, compressing space-time after all, and weaving between stars might be the quicker way of getting somewhere, which makes pilots more valuable than just sitting there on autopilot. But things like that, the helm will have a lot more going on in the future. Sophie Dunn asks, what about security gameplay? Yeah, so we have an in-game organisation, which at the moment is called the Society for the Preservation of Humanity, and they are against humanity exploring the stars because they believe it is a mathematical certainty that we will meet a hostile alien species, and that will bring about the end of humanity. So as such, they conduct, I wouldn't go so far as to say terrorist activity, because they're not. They're about protecting humanity, not harming people. But they will sabotage the ship, and they'll sabotage the mission, and they'll try and make it so that the mission can't happen, and you have to return home to Earth. And part of the internal security role will be, if something gets sabotaged, investigating what that is. And players will have the ability to sabotage things as well. So when you interact with a piece of equipment, one of the options will be sabotage. And the more often you do it, the more likelihood there is that you'll leave evidence behind, and then the security person will be able to identify that it was that person that did it. That aside, that's the tactical console over there, and that person will be manning the weapons for the ship. They're in the same department, they're in the tactical department, so you might be on bridge duty manning the ship's weapons, or you might be accompanying an away team to a planetary surface or something like that. The Undertaker says it would be great to be able to repair a badly damaged ship and salvage parts and resources from derelicts. Yeah, definitely. We definitely want to implement alien derelicts as an explorable thing, and I'm picturing them in my head a bit like a procedural dungeon from like Diablo, where you have tile sets of different designs and styles, and then the interior of the derelict alien ship or the derelict alien station is pieced together procedurally using those like Lego bricks essentially. So every derelict alien ship and station is going to be different from the last one, and then there'll be things in there that you can salvage, and a security system you've got to overcome, or power's off and the doors won't open, so you need to restore power to get to the thing that you want. So it's definitely something we've got planned. Thanks for watching, Leosh. Good to see you again. Faux Flame's got a good question. Does the lore include FTL communications? How isolated are we once we leave Sol? So we're using a technique which is technically impossible, and it's one of those things that we're twisting for the sake of gameplay. We're using the quantum entanglement of individual particles as a 1 and 0 flip. So, and there's going to be more to it than this as well with other alien species, but essentially there is a box of particles on Earth and a box of particles on the ship, and if you were to lose that box, then you've now lost your ability to communicate with Earth. So that's how comms are managed, by flipping these quantum entangled particles so that it's going from 1 to 0, and that gives you digital communication. Now beyond that, we're also going to have alien comms relays, and there will be a group of aliens who are all signed up to this communications relay so that all these different alien societies can all communicate with one another on this sort of grand trunk of comms relays. And obviously humans, being new on the scene, they want to be a part of that, so part of the story campaign will be trying to negotiate that so that humans can be added to part of this alliance of sorts, where we are now part of the comms network and we can now communicate with them, and that's all based on quantum entanglement. But yeah, so in a physical sense that's not possible, because as soon as you collapse the state of a quantum particle, you can no longer use it. But we're hand waving that. Fredishay asks, what is the premise for why someone would just hand me the keys to a starship? Am I an officer in something equivalent to Starfleet, or am I an insanely wealthy oligarch who just bought one? Either or. So yeah, so on this ship at least, and on this mission, because different DLCs are going to be different ships and different missions. This one's all about space exploration, so you are an officer serving in the UN space fleet, and you are part of the crew embarking on mankind's first deep space exploration mission. That's the point of you existing on this ship. That's why you're here. In other expansions, that will be different. It'll be a different ship with a different crew for a different purpose, and that will be from private enterprise. So the third DLC is going to be you owning a cargo company essentially, and delivering cargo and working your way up through different ships. The second DLC is going to be you serving on a military vessel, a carrier class. So they're all going to be different. Oh, every time I scroll there's more. Wow. Anomalous Bites says, I wonder if items like tablets could be usable. Yeah, so we do have tablets in the game. There's the one that usually trips me up over. Where did it go? Did I kick it into oblivion? Must have done. Yeah, we do want to use those. So take this one, for example. If we were to make this usable, then there's a lot we can store on there, like crew information, making log entries, and again, going back to wanting to take on a character specialist, all the animation work for picking it up and holding it in front of your face. That's the kind of stuff we need to be able to interact with these objects. But yeah, there's no reason why we can't use tablets for a job within the game. Everything is going to have a purpose. Which is why we're right down to the light switches. And that's kind of one of our main design goals. I hate that these are just scattered on the desk here for no other reason than to make it look like something's going on, but you can't pick them up, you can't do anything with them. You should be able to pick things up and chuck them. So they'll be going, and yeah, so things like tablets, if it exists and it's got an interface, you should be able to use it for something, even if it's something completely arbitrary, like just turning lights on and off. It'll be interactable and usable in some way. Yeah, exactly that. Every button does something. Thanks, Scorpio Gaming. Yeah, it's, again, I know I keep saying it, but I am going to keep saying it. We are absolutely floored by how much support we've got. It's just amazing, and I cannot say thank you enough times. It's just huge. So thank you again. Sophie asks, will there be enlisted people on the ship that is not an officer? Yes, there will be many. The crew hierarchy, obviously the captain is a captain. You've got XO as a commander, and then department heads will either be lieutenants or lieutenant commanders. You'll probably have a couple of ensigns in each department, but the whole rest of the crew are all just going to be crew members. Enlisted officers not officers, just enlisted crew that just get on with whatever job they're there to do. We'll probably have it so that all the scientists are civilians, so they're not actually actively serving in the UN military, they're just civilians working aboard the ship. Bear with me one moment. Sorry about that, I was just helping Claire with something. Sophie asks, about the rank structure, will it be based on the US naval rank or the UK Royal Navy rank? I guess both, because we've simplified it, so yeah, there are a lot of naval or military ranks which are kind of like in-betweeny ranks. We're just going for the main ranks. Yeah, so I think other than Commodore, UK and US ranks are roughly equivalent. If I recall, I can't remember. Oh, yeah, I think Commodore is like Rear Admiral lower half in the US, but we don't actually have a Commodore in the game. We probably will, maybe at some point, but yeah, I think that they're so interchangeable that it's pretty much like for like. Gilherm asks, how hard will the science be? Will there be things such as tachyon communications, subspace sensors, hyperspace, or non-corporeal aliens? Yeah. We'll obviously, we will expand what non-traditional sciencey things there are. We don't want to stray too far from accepted science, because the whole point of this is real science, real astrophysics. But for the sake of gameplay and keeping it interesting, we will have sci-fi elements to it. Like the wormholes, and there could be a nebula which is corrosive in some way. So we'll definitely have that. Yeah, and things like non-corporeal aliens. Yeah, definitely. We don't know what life might be like outside of our star system. There could be any number of types of life that we haven't even considered. So, yeah, we'll have everything we can think of, really. Robert asks a good question about save points. So right now, the game is like Minecraft in that it's auto-saving continuously. I think, yes, we will implement save points eventually, so that we don't suffer a permadeath because your cat jumped on the keyboard or something like that. Or your computer's blue screened and all of a sudden you've lost your ship and crew that you've been nurturing for the past 3 years. So we will have the ability to manually create a save point, but the autosave is continuously saving. I think I set it to 5 seconds off the top of my head, so I think every 5 seconds it saves whatever state the ship's in. Fedichet asks, will I be able to beam down to habitable planets and walk on their surface to collect resources? Beaming, no. We won't have transporters or teleporters or anything like that, but you will be able to take a shuttle down and explore on the surface. Sophie asks, will you be able to play as a civilian scientist? Yes. So the ship has 200 and a bit crew quarters, and that's the full crew, and you can be any one of those crew members from the janitor up to the captain. So when we've implemented the full proper start a new mission screen, the one that's there now is just a placeholder. You'll be able to select specifically which NPC and which role you want to take the place of. From a scientist to a janitor to whatever. It's completely freeform. Yeah, exactly, Fedichet. For some things we're going to have to stray away from real science. We're trying to keep it, at least in terms of theoretical science, like mathematically, FTL is possible. The papers by Albicubieri and Dr. Eric Lentz, they have proven mathematically that it does work, it is possible, if you can generate enough energy, and in Albicubieri's case, if you can somehow get hold of some exotic negative matter. But on paper it works. So it's not real science, but it is at least theoretical science, and that's how we want it to be for most things. Yeah, I'm not sure about alternative Earth histories or mirror universes or anything like that. At least not anytime soon. Digital Scribe's got a good question. How intelligent will an AI captain be? Yeah, so I have been planning that system in my head already, and so far the idea is that obviously the ship itself has a general point and an objective and some standing orders, and the NPC captain will be working in adherence to those standing orders, but they'll also have a priority tree. So if nothing bad's happening, then the NPC captain will fall back to, let's go and explore the next star system. If the ship's running low on fuel, then the captain will go into, right, now we need to find a gas giant to refuel the ship mode. If combat unexpectedly happens, then that will take precedence over the refueling, for example, if it's not urgently needing to be refueled. So depending on what the current priority list is and what the highest priority task is in that list, that captain will make the decision to order the ship and crew to do that thing. We'll add some variability in there as well, so the captain's not always making the most perfect decision every single time, but we want the NPCs to be relatively good at their job, so that if you as the player just want to be the janitor and all you want to do is just walk around cleaning the ship and just minding your own business, watching things out the window as they happen, we don't want the NPC crew to be sort of incompetent and constantly failing, because that kind of ruins your fun as the janitor. In some ways it might be funny if it suddenly flies into a star, but for the most part the NPC crew will be quite competent at their job. Are we planning to build full-on cities? So that's a complicated one. I mean, yes, the game is going to generate city planets, but generating that from an orbital perspective is easy because you can just do it with textures and things. Generating it from a surface perspective is a whole different matter entirely, because you need to literally generate a city on a planet. I think the way we'll likely handle that if we go back to the age of a planet and how advanced the life is, if you've got a pre-industrial society and they're just living in shacks or villages, then we can adopt the Minecraft approach of spawning in small settlements based on the biome and some random number, whatever the seed happens to be. So encountering a small village with some NPCs that just spawns dynamically is fairly simple to achieve, because that's a small thing that you're generating. Generating an entire cohesive cityscape with hundreds of thousands of NPCs with cars and vehicles and things, that's, I would say, really, really beyond the scope of what's possible in this game. So there's going to have to be a cut-off in the development age of a planet. So I think anything larger than pre-industrial, anything larger than a small village, we're going to have to restrict where the player can go on that planet. It might be the case that you can see the city from a distance, because that's not difficult to do, but to get close to the city there would have to be some kind of loading transition to enter the city proper, simply because of how difficult it will be to generate an entire city procedurally. But yeah, that's definitely a question for the future. Sophie asks, if combat happens for civilians, do civilians help out during combat? Yes, they can do. So we don't want to limit the actions of what a person can do on the ship. A civilian scientist or a chef, they're quite capable as a human being of picking up a weapon and pointing it at someone. They don't have to necessarily be trained combat specialists in order to do that. So that will be possible for anyone in the game. If the ship's being invaded and the chef wants to grab a gun and start helping, then they are free to do so. Obviously I'm talking players. NPCs, I think it's going to depend on the personality profile of that generated NPC. If they're generated as being really gung-ho, then perhaps they will get involved. Otherwise they will go and cower in a corner somewhere. I don't imagine we will have specific lockdown locations for NPCs. It's probably more a case that they will lock themselves into the room that they're currently in. But again, we will tweak the AI logic accordingly on that one. Yeah, Commander at M117 makes a good point, in that the home world of an alien species could literally just be restricted space, and we can avoid the challenge of generating a highly populated world by simply not allowing the player to go there. I would prefer that we have like fenced off surface locations, like on Earth, for example. So obviously we can't have Earth as a surface environment to explore, because that's a mental amount of stuff that you'd have to simulate. But we can create like the UN headquarters or the UN Space Academy. We can generate those locations on the surface and limit the player to those locations. So you still get the experience of going to that surface, but you don't have the free reign of going over the horizon and ruining my day trying to generate whole cities. It's easy to do that manually. It would be challenging to do that procedurally, because if you're doing it procedurally, then you need to define those surface areas in the code, and then set those up as restricted zones in an entirely procedural way. It's not impossible, but not anytime soon. But I think version 1 of that system is probably going to be that the homeworld of an advanced alien species you cannot get to the surface of, but a single settlement on a moon somewhere, you'll be able to get there. Will there be epic PvP space battles? The easy and quick answer is no, but there is a caveat to that, in that I do want to implement a ship versus ship sort of capture the ship mode, and that would be an isolated thing on the menu, so you would go into that separately from the game itself. I used to be a huge fan of Dark Age of Camelot, and one of the things we used to love to do was keep raids. So you'd rock up to an enemy keep with like a battering ram and a trebuchet, and that was really cool. So I thought it would be nice to do something similar in this, where you've got two large ships facing off of one another, crew on each ship, and the idea is that you have to disable the opponent's ship, and then somehow get your shuttle into their ship to board them, and then fight your way to their bridge, and then capture their bridge, and then that would be, match over. So I think any PvP that we implement will be standalone PvP, not in the game proper, because you're working on the same ship as part of the same crew, so it's more of a co-op game anyway. Wow, have we done it? Have we actually got to the end of the questions? Sophie asks, will there be a UNCJ? I don't actually know what a UMCJ is, I'm afraid. I'll have to Google that. I won't Google it now, but yeah. So, I guess the answer is no, because I don't know what it is. Right, I'm going to attempt to do a bit of dev work whilst also answering questions. Let's see how well this goes. Take a swig of whiskey first, just to be sure. Oh, okay. Yeah, we probably won't go that deep into simulating military life. It's more life aboard the ship. Not sure what you mean there, Zenevent. Do you mean being able to make a different decision? Thanks, Undertaker. Thanks for joining the stream. Oh, right, yes. Yeah, so yeah, right now, the game just auto-saves every 5 seconds, and you return to the game wherever you left off. It would be nice to be able to also do a manual save, and then that would be a snapshot of the game at that point, which I think is definitely needed, because there are times when your game will fail, and it's not your fault. Something external happened to ruin your game. Yeah, so not allowing the player to reload a previous save would be horrible in that instance. Yeah. See, normally the dev streams have about, I'd say, about 20 people on them at most, and that usually dribbles off to about 12 or so, because there's only so much of me talking people can listen to, including Claire. She goes blank and turns off after a while too. But yeah, 80 odd people on the stream. That's definitely a record, and would explain why it's so busy. But really, that's the story of our past 48 hours. I don't think we've been this busy with, like, I guess you'd call it studio activity, ever in the past 3 years of making this game. It's just been an absolute whirlwind, and yeah, it's left us a little bit dizzy. Thanks, Jack Ryder. I'm surprised I haven't lost my voice yet. Yeah, I don't think we'll have a specific code of justice. I mean, when we flesh out the lore, that sort of thing will be added to the lore as part of the lore. But I doubt we'll implement anything like that sort of in the game world. It's perhaps beyond the scope a bit of what it is we're doing. Yeah, playable aliens, that's a good question. So this is a good time to go and say hello to Steve, isn't it? Hello, Steve. So Steve here is just a typical grey, and I will be including them in a typical way with UFOs and everything, just because it'd be funny. But as we get out there and explore, we will be losing crew members to accident, injury, illness, and you will start to struggle if too many NPCs are lost, because obviously someone needs to be completing those tasks. So the ability to recruit an alien to work on the ship would be a really good thing to do, and if they're part of your crew, then technically you can then be them. And there's nothing from a technological perspective preventing that, so yeah, I don't see why not. Yeah, this will be a bathroom, by the way. It says armory right now, but the weapons locker is actually going to be here on this wall. This is the internal security station, or at least it will be when I make it. So there'll be a weapons locker here for protecting the bridge, which means that this is going to be the A-deck bathroom instead, which Steve is the toilet attendant for. He's just making sure that people wash their hands and stuff. So what I was doing is I was looking for something to fix. So, oh yeah, so we had stars coming up twice. So that was one thing that randomly started happening, and I don't know why off the top of my head. That's one thing to investigate. Being able to target these properly is the other thing we need to do. And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, sorting out the holo display. Thanks, Holo. 500 backers on Kickstarter. Wow, brilliant. Let's have a look. Ah, yes. Wow, that's a hell of a milestone. And you are now both the first and second live chat we've ever had, so well done. That's a good question, Quack. Yeah, our multiplayer implementation is, I guess you could say, modelled on Minecraft, in that you can just host a session and drop in and drop out of that session for as long as it's running. So we will be implementing a headless client for dedicated servers at some point. So if you had a rented server or you were hosting your own server, you can just start a game, leave it running, set a password, and anyone in your player group can just hop in and out of that server anytime they want to. And because your player is replaced by an NPC when you leave, it means that the ship will always be fully crewed, no matter how many actual players are on board. We will also have space stations around Sol, and something I'm really looking forward to is building a shipyard with all the ships that we ever make all parked up so you can look around them. Yeah, that's a big thing for us actually, Sophie, is the transparency. Like we were saying earlier, with a handful of people suddenly crying scam when a game goes on Kickstarter, we could not possibly be more transparent. I mean, we literally post updates in real time on our Discord, as they happen most of the time. We live stream it all the time. It's I don't think it's quite possible to get any more open than we are. Unless I just take all my clothes off, and that's perhaps too open. Although if Walper's in the chat, I'm sure he'll enjoy that. Will the alien atmospheres be the same as ours? No. So the composition of exoplanet atmospheres is obviously going to be procedural, so they'll all be different. And there's that spectrum of breathability for humans. I would say most planets probably won't fall within that range, so you'll probably need breathing equipment for most planets. If I guess atmospheric pressure is also another big one, because you could have worlds which have the same atmospheric pressure as Earth, but a different chemical composition, and on those ones you just need some kind of breathing equipment. But in other worlds where the atmospheric pressure is different, you're going to need pressure suits as well. But we will definitely work around that when it comes to it. Gilherm asks, can we create our own bases and our own planets and space stations? No, we're steering clear of settlements and base building, because this ship is a base. This is a giant mobile base that you're flying through space. It's upgradable in every way. So there's every system can be upgraded and improved, and it has its own fleet of vehicles in the shuttle bay. It has its own crew that need taken care of. So this is a base. It's just a mobile base, and we want players to be invested in the ship and exploring the galaxy, not limiting themselves to just hanging around on a single planet. Fedishay asks, what are your thoughts on the modding community? I've been a modder myself. I mean, I guess that's how I started with my game dev. I started with Quake, making maps for Quake, and I made mods for the original GTA games. Yeah, so I'm completely supportive of the modding community because I was one once. So I have no problem with people making mods for the game. Obviously, from an official perspective, we can't support anything which isn't an IP infringement or something which is distasteful in some way. But good, clean modding fun, yeah, we're all for it. If people want to mod in their own uniforms, or they want to mod some other thing in the game, then yeah, feel free. We're not a live service game, so we're not restricted like an MMO. The client is fully exposed to modders, and it doesn't matter if I say I like it or not, it's going to happen either way. But you only need to look at games like Skyrim to see how much good modders do for games sometimes. The popularity and the longevity of Skyrim is practically entirely down to the modding community, and that's just amazing. Sophie asks, what different types of uniforms that will be available in the game? So the crew uniform is largely what it is. I can't show you the customization screen because it's pretty sure it's going to bring up a debug display. Yeah, it is. So yeah, that's no fun to look at. Yeah, so the crew uniform... Oh, of course I can show out my character, can't I? Bad example, because he's just wearing a shirt. Hang on. Let's go for a different one. So we want that one. Maybe go to engineering. So you've got, obviously, a coloured shirt and a coloured jacket. So you've got those details of colour. And initially I was against the idea of allowing that to be customizable, because I didn't want to, I guess, join a multiplayer game and everyone's wearing different colours, and then you have no idea what department they're in or what they do, because you're used to engineering being orange. But I think I am relenting on that one, and we will allow any RGB color for uniforms, so that if people want pink uniforms, they can have pink uniforms. I said from the beginning I didn't want to limit player creativity, and not allowing that is placing a limit on player creativity. So yeah, so we will allow it at some point. In terms of different styles of uniforms, I mean, you've got like uniform trousers and like cargo pants and things, but the uniform kind of is what it is. When it comes to off-duty clothing, we intend to have a wide array of off-duty outfits for players to wear, and long term the plan is that you'll need to go into your crew quarters and like use a wardrobe or a mirror or something to bring up the interface to change your clothes. So you won't be able to get undressed on the bridge. You'll have to go to your crew quarters and do that. Ken has a great question. Will this be another Fight the Aliens project, or something to engage the grey matter of exploration? I can say, without any shadow of a doubt, that this is absolutely a space exploration game. Any combat that you get into will either be a failure of diplomacy or meeting just an outright hostile alien species. It's not a space combat game, it is a space exploration game. That doesn't mean it won't have combat, because combat will happen. Eventually your ship can get boarded and then you can board other ships, but that's not the point of the game. It's just something that can happen in the game. Chris asks, is planetary landings planned? Yeah, we've spoken about it at some length. So the quick answer is yes, via a shuttle. Gilham's asking about upgrades and things in the ship. So again, because I'm on a dev build, this is actually quite difficult, because actually I'll just teleport this quicker. I've ripped the ship apart, but the rear of the ship is going to be the probe facility. I think I am finally going to call it a probe facility. This is the probing room, and in here you will be launching probes to planetary surfaces to get resources, samples, that sort of thing. And they will be physicalized, so when the probe returns, it'll have a little trunk you can open up, and inside there will be whatever that physical item is. You will then grab that item and take it to the relevant science lab. So let's say that there's a door here, pretend, and there's a lab in there, and that's, say, the geology lab, and you've just got a rock from the planet's surface. When the geology lab perform their scans on that sample, that could unlock a new mineral which improves the sensors in some way or makes the FTL coils more efficient. And that's how you access upgrades and things for your ship, by scanning new materials, conducting science, and unlocking new materials and things. And you'd then go and remove the old component and replace it with a new 3D printed one using that new material. When are we going to release? So I'm hoping that we can get the game into a solid alpha state by April 2025. So that's exactly 12 months after Kickstarter ending. Now, what that looks like obviously depends on how successful Kickstarter is. You know, if if we succeed and we even hit a couple of stretch goals, then I'm going to have at least a couple more developers working with me, which means we can get more done more quickly and make that early access alpha release more fleshed out, more polished. If for example we just about scrape through the 65,000 target, then when you take Kickstarter fees and taxes and all that into account, that isn't enough for me to take on anyone else. That literally just keeps me working and fed with a roof over our heads for another year or so. In which case, the early access that we release won't be as fleshed out as it otherwise could be if we hit stretch goals and take on more developers. And that's really the story of why we're on Kickstarter. But timescale wise, I wouldn't expect to see any kind of early access release before 12 months. I think that's an optimistic target. But we will be updating the demo periodically. There's definitely 2 more demo updates in the pipeline, and after those 2 updates we'll probably take a break from updating the demo for a while, and then maybe on the next major feature we'll push that to the demo, but we're not going to take the demo down. We will leave the demo live. Oval Dream's got a good question. How will we keep the exploration from feeling bleak? Yeah, so I've got about 10,000 hours in Elite Dangerous, and most of that is exploration. And you're right, the galaxy is a big place and it's full of a lot of barren rocks, and it'll be the same in this. There's going to be a lot of barren rocks in the galaxy because that simply is what the galaxy contains. The difference between the Elite experience and what we're doing is that we'll have alien life, alien civilizations scattered throughout the whole galaxy. So, in Elite, when you leave the bubble, you're really leaving civilization behind. There are no alien civilizations out there you can interact with. It's very different with this. And as I talked about earlier, we don't exactly know how many alien civilizations there will be yet, because that's entirely driven by the procedural generation and how those planets generate life. It could be that there's a dozen alien species per sector, or there could just be a handful. We don't know yet. But the standing orders of the ship itself are to seek out habitable worlds for human colonization. That's the standing order of what the ship's supposed to be doing. And in doing so, you will naturally be encountering alien species if there's already someone living there. And in those cases, you'll be attempting to make peaceful first contact, and then you may or may not succeed in that endeavor, and they might be chasing you out of their system, guns blazing. But yeah, we're also having things like wormholes, adding a bit more flavor to the galaxy. And I think the difference between what we're doing and other titles that tackle exploration is filling the galaxy with life and interesting stuff. That's like our main objective. That's very much our focus for the game. We're not focusing on combat or trading or any other mechanic. We are literally focusing on the galaxy and filling that galaxy with interesting content. I'd say that's what makes us unique in the space sim genre. Sorry, I got to scroll up again. Yeah, that's a good question, Ken, about SpaceX or NASA. I don't think we have anything to offer them in particular as a training tool. I would say, anyone at SpaceX or NASA know a lot more than I do. So we've got nothing to bring to the party there. But when it comes to teaching people that have never really been into astrophysics before or astronomy, there is a lot there that you can learn, just down to how you navigate the ship, how you look for habitable worlds, because it's all based on real astrophysics, and all the exoplanets and things are generated realistically. The art of finding exoplanets that are Earth-likes would be the same in real life as it is in the game. So, naturally, you're learning about the structure of the galaxy, you're learning about how star systems are generating, you're learning about what star classes are. Like, if you ask the average person on the street, can you list all the main sequence star classes? They'll probably give you a blank look, like, what? So, that is stuff that people can learn, like genuine science knowledge, just by playing the game. And I think that's really cool. And we'd really love it if, some science group used the game for a teaching tool and conducted tours of the solar system, or tours of the local constellations, to teach students about the galaxy and about astrophysics, using the game as a teaching tool. But yeah, we think we would be all for that. That would be amazing. Chris asks, will we be able to sell science data? Not as a game mechanic. Maybe in the future, in a future expansion, if you perhaps have a private entity with its own exploration ships, and you want to buy bigger and better ships, in that instance, yes, that could be valuable. But at least on this ship, this isn't a commercial ship. This is a UN organization ship, and you're out here to do a job, and all the science data that you're gathering is going back to the UN. It's not commercial data that you're selling. At some point, it would be nice to be able to use that perhaps as a trade commodity with an alien species. So, perhaps they've got something that they're offering you, like a new technology, and they're asking you, what can you give us for this thing? And then you could turn around and say, how about our entire star charts? Here's all the data we've scanned. Do you want that in return for this object? In that sense, yes, we could do something like that. Cedric asks, is there going to be a dating sim made for people who want to roleplay as Riker? We do want the NPC interaction on the ship to be dynamic, and I'm thinking games like RimWorld, where your colonists in RimWorld have quite a good colony sim going on, where they've got relationships and likes and dislikes, and they can fall out with people. It would be nice to have that level of interaction on the ship. Are you going to be able to woohoo with them, to use the Sims parlance? No, probably not. We want to keep the game family friendly. But yeah, relationships, yes. nothing beyond that. Okay, Fredashay's got a good question about ChatGPT. So we did actually have a ChatGPT interface already, where you could type like Ava and then say hello to her, and she would use GPT 3.5 to respond, and I'd set that up so she wouldn't talk about anything other than stuff on the ship. But we ran out of tokens quite quickly, as you might expect, because they're expensive. So AI is a widely debated topic at the moment. You know, the pros and cons of AI are a hot debate. From our perspective, I don't think the technology has matured enough yet. I can definitely see where it can be exciting, and having the NPC crew driven by a large language model so that you can actually talk to them and they're actually aware of their surroundings. Like, you know, right now we're at Earth, and you know, you can feed that information into the language model. So you could ask an NPC, you know, what's that out the window? And they'll say, that's Earth, because they know you've told them in the back end. However, you know, you've got the question of training data, which rears its ugly head. You know, was that training data legitimately sourced? And, you know, is this language model in any way exploitive? And it's a bit of a minefield. So, in principle, yes, I think it would be awesome to be able to drive the NPCs like that, but it needs to be the right model, and it needs to be the right training data, and it also needs to run locally. So, and that's a huge, you know, problem right now. Not so much the size of the model, because you can get some, you know, reasonably small models that are just a couple of gig, and I don't think that's unreasonable to drive an entire game system, you know, install size wise. But they are very GPU heavy, and if you imagine, you know, 200 NPCs all trying to have conversations, that's constantly hitting the GPU. So in that sense, it wouldn't be playable. And the only alternative to that is to use online services like, you know, OpenAI services, and they cost loads of money with tokens. So yeah, I think, you know, for those reasons, that's why I think the technology is not quite there yet. But eventually it will be, and eventually we will look into it, along with procedurally generating surface assets on planets using AI. So, and I guess this is the thing that excites me the most. We've got AI technology for things like music, art, writing, all sorts of things. Now imagine a galaxy like this where we could literally have, you know, tens of thousands, if not more, alien civilizations in this galaxy. And there's no way we could ever manually create deep content for all of those civilizations. There's just too many. Even using procedural generation has its limits, because the pool of data that you put into the procedural system can only go so far. But on AI, it's unlimited. So if it was driven by a seed, and that seed was consistent, then you could rock up to a planet and have an alien species with a deep history, a deep culture, artwork that is generated by that species, you know, music, what they look like themselves. All of it could be completely unique in the galaxy because it was made by AI. But again, this is a future version of AI that doesn't have the problems that are inherent with current versions of AI. So that's a really long way of saying, at some point, not yet. Gilherm asks, will there be a wider diplomatic context for aliens that know each other, etc.? Yeah. So with the way the galaxy's generated, it's generated in 100 light-year cubes. And each one of those 100 light-year cubes is generated at once. So that has a seed, and then that seed drives where the stars or whatever else is located within that 100 light-year cube. Now, as part of that sector generation, we will generate a political state for that entire sector. So we know in advance when we generate life, say there's 5 planets, and 5 planets generate alien life. Now, it will then check against the sector to know whether or not those 5 planets should all be the same species, or whether or not that should be like half the planets in one alliance and half the planet in another, or whether or not they should all be isolated independent worlds. So we can actually control that on a sector by sector basis. So one sector that you rock up to could literally all be run by the same royal family, and all the planets and all the ships and things are all part of that same organization. And then the next sector over could just be a bunch of independent worlds. The limitation of that system is that is isolated to that 100 light year sector. Now that's quite a lot of space still, but it means that the next sector along has no knowledge of what was in the previous sector. But where that relates to the ship itself is that if you're constantly doing bad things, we will track a a humanity score or something, a bit like the D&D lawful good, neutral good kind of system, and we'll be storing that in the background. So if you get to an alien species, they might know about you already. They'll be like, hang on, we've heard of you, and that could be like a bad impression that you've left on other species, or it could be a good impression. But because we're storing that based on player activity, that can go across sectors. So if you're consistently horrible to someone, that will have a knock-on effect. Alien ships probably won't be able to chase you beyond their sector, again because of the sector generation rules. But we'll look into that and how deep we can go with that once we get to the whole life generation thing, which will be beginning as of the next patch. Oh, and in terms of grudges and things, yes, so when you encounter an alien species, it will append that species data to a save file. So for every species you meet, that save file is going to grow, and that will hold what state your relationship is with that species, what they think about you, if there's a plot line surrounding that species, how far through it are you, etc., etc. So if you return to that species at a later date, they'll still know everything about you and will still remember your last interaction. Sorry, scrolling again. Chris mentions Toby Eye Tracker. Yeah, we actually spoke to the guys from Toby Eye Tracker at PitCon when we were there. Yeah, we tried it out and it's great, and I think we can make it work. It's difficult in a game like this, obviously, because you're walking around. So the eye tracker works great if you're sat at the helm, for example, because you can look around. But the moment you get up and try and walk about, it's not quite as good. But yeah, it's something we'll look into. I don't actually have one, so I need to get hold of one and see what we can do with it. Ken was asking, what type of hardware servers do you expect this to be run on? They're player hosted, so you start a game and players join your game. So it depends on your computer's hardware spec and your internet connection. Obviously, the better your computer is and the better your internet connection is, the more players you'll be able to host in your game. If you pay for a dedicated server and use that instead, then you could have potentially a full crew of 200. But we haven't tested that. The most people we've had in a game just hosted on our PC is 13, and that was fine and didn't have any lag at all, which was quite good. You're welcome, Frederichet. This is this is a dream project for us. It's like I said before, we're not approaching this like a traditional studio. This is both a work of passion and a hobby, and this isn't a commercial adventure for us. This is way more than that. This is more a passion thing than a commercial thing, for sure. Good question from Rocketman. Any chance of a civilization with territory that extends across multiple sectors? Yes, those will be the manually created ones. So, if we look at this in like Star Trek terms, for example, in Star Trek you've got the big named races. You've got like the Vulcans and the Klingons and the Romulans. They're the regular races that you see all the time. And then you've got like the alien of the week. If you imagine like Voyager, Voyager had random aliens that you never saw again in any other episodes. And to use that analogy, the procedural aliens that you encounter in the galaxy, they're like the aliens of the week. That you'll meet them, you'll interact with them. Unless they're particularly interesting, you'll probably never go back there again. You'll move on to the next one. Whereas the named, manually created alien species, those are the ones that are going to form part of the story and the plot and the whole campaign thing that we want to do. So those ones can spread across multiple sectors. They could have hundreds of sectors in their control, potentially have a whole region of space. But yeah, the procedural ones will most likely be limited to a single sector unless something changes. Oh, sorry, did I miss a question? Yeah, so if you're playing solo, then the NPC crew will do everything that you're not personally doing. It's a bit different depending on which role you pick. So, if you're captain, then you've got to do your job because you're the only person doing that job. But if you're playing as a random engineer, then you can skive off a bit because there'll be other NPC engineers and they'll be picking up the tasks from the task list. And for you as a player, it's an optional thing. You can either do the tasks and work hard at your role, or just leave it for the NPCs to do. To a point, anyway, because if you've lost any NPCs over the travels, then there might be more tasks being generated than you have NPCs to do them. In which case, you will need to get cracking and do some work. Yeah, will there be politics and diplomacy? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to say initially no, because for one, with the way that FTL comms works in the game, because we're using quantum entanglement to do our communications, there'd be no way for the UN to communicate with that species anyway. And we'll probably have that radiating out from Sol. So we'll probably do that more in a manual way. So, and I suppose that's a good point. We are going to be paying attention to the community very closely, and a couple of the things which happened in Elite, for example, is you had things like Beagle Point, where it became a place where it became known in the player community, and Frontier recognized that and they named it in game. And I love that. I love how player activity shaped the galaxy that they're playing in, and we very much want to do the same thing. So if a lot of players focus around a certain location, and if that location becomes a bit of a meme within the game, then yeah, absolutely, we'll set that in stone. If there's an alien species which players love, and all the procedural dice rolls created something awesome, then yeah, I mean, we can set that in stone so it's preserved and never gets changed, and start rolling it into the lore properly. Yeah, another good point actually there that Spud mentions about playing solo is obviously our first ship that we've built is a massive starship with 200 crew members and lots of jobs to do. But the next ship we build is going to be small. I'm probably going to make it as a scout ship, and that will be owned and run by a private enterprise. So like a private corporation has chartered its own crew to go out and look for things to exploit for the corporation. And that's probably going to be kind of 5 to 10 crew members in size, something which is a lot more suitable for solo play, or small multiplayer groups. Because if you have a ship with a 5-man crew, then it's really easy to get 5 players together and have those 5 players literally managing every part of the ship with no NPCs involved at all. So it's not always going to be about the big cruisers. Glenn asks if you can change your roles at any point during play. Yes. Yeah, we want to make that fairly freeform, and with the idea being that, again, kind of like Matrix agent style, you just take over an NPC. You can at any point, if you get bored of your role, just choose to take over another NPC instead, and then whatever you were, say you were the captain, you would be replaced by an NPC captain, and now you're the janitor. Thanks, Joe, that's appreciated. Chris asks, will there be random events like pipe leaks and failing batteries? Yeah, every component on the ship will have a health and an efficiency value, and another word I can't remember. But stamina, something like stamina. It's nearly 11 PM here, my brain's starting to shut down. But yeah, it's so take a pipe, for example. When that pipe is brand new and you've just 3D printed it, it will have a high quality value, let's say. So the quality is 100%, and then the health is 100%. If that pipe then takes damage, then the health drops and the quality drops a bit. When you repair it, the health goes back up to 100, but the quality won't go up. The quality has been lessened because it's now a repaired device. And that quality value will drop and drop and drop, and the percentage of chance that something's going to break or go wrong will depend on its quality value. So a fully repaired pipe with a really, really low quality will have a high chance of just continually breaking. And the reason we're doing it that way is so that you can't just keep patching something over and over again. At some point you will have to replace it, in which case you have to shut down whatever that thing is, go and print out a new part, and then replace that part with a brand new one. And then you've got 100% quality, 100% health, and you're good to go again. Yeah, so the idea with the comms network in the game is so Earth and the ships that are outside of Sol, they all have these quantum entanglements boxes, essentially. And on Earth there will be this big relay place where these quantum entangled particles are kept deep below ground in a really secure location so they can't be lost. And there's a copy of that on the ship, and that's how you communicate. And then with the alien species, they will have something similar on their side, and I like the idea of there being this grand trunk, and I'm thinking like the Clax Towers in Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. The grand trunk of quantum particles which relay messages around, and Earth kind of using diplomacy to try and join and be part of that. I think that'd be quite a cool thing to explore. Digital Scribe asks, will you get promoted based on performance or hours played? Neither. So in the sandbox there won't be like promotions aboard the ship, because you're there to do a job and that's your role, and having the ability to just pick any role you want at any time, and if you get bored of being the captain you can go be a chef, kind of negates the idea of having promotion mechanics. But in the actual campaign, when we build that's going to be more focused on your life as a crew member, and you won't be able to switch roles in the campaign, and you'll have to go to bed at the end of your shift and wake up in the morning and report for duty, and that's more of a life aboard the ship experience, and that's what the single player campaign is going to be all about. Whereas in the sandbox you can just bounce between things and do anything. Yeah, you're right, Spud. I am in Somerset, and I do enjoy a can of Thatcher's Blood Orange. But generally, if I'm drinking, I don't drink very much. I very rarely drink alcohol, but if I do, it's usually mead. Where I live in Dunster, there's a really nice village here, and there's a shop that sells different meads, which I love. So yeah. Yeah, the comms box is a magic comms box, and I think for the sake of gameplay it's going to have to be like a black box. It's invulnerable. Good question from Fredashay. Will we be able to replicate brand new parts, or will we have to go to a starbase for repairs for parts that are too low quality? So small parts, you will be able to fabricate them on the ship. There will be 3D printers for making parts. I don't necessarily want absolutely everything to be fully repairable on the fly. Most things, yes, but we do need to maintain sort of an element of risk and I want there to be a conscious decision to turn around and head back home, and it's probably going to be the reactor. So there'll be components on the reactor which will be repairable and replaceable, but I think the actual reaction chamber itself, the core of the fusion reactor, I think that's something that will make that you can't repair. So if you're out in space and you've taken a lot of damage and your fusion reactor is getting low on health, and we'll make it tough, it won't just immediately get low on health, then at that point you really do need to return home to Earth to get a proper repair done, because if you ignore it, then it could get destroyed, and at that point you can't fix it, and now you're dead in space. So it forces that choice on the player of, do you risk staying out exploring for those few more exploration points, or do you turn tail and run back home to Earth? Thank you, Matt. That's amazing. Thank you. Kreas asks, is there a chance of captaining a cargo ship? Yeah, so I did mention this earlier, but I'll go over it again briefly. The first ship we're building is an exploration ship commissioned by the UN Space Fleet, and it's all about science and exploration. But this is all part of DLC 1, which is focused on science and exploration. The second DLC is going to focus on combat and fighting a hostile alien species that you will have discovered during DLC 1. Now, DLC 3 is all about picking up the pieces from that conflict, and DLC 3 is where you will be the owner of your own transport company, space transport company, and you'll have your own cargo ship, which will be small and kind of pathetic. And the idea in that DLC is that you upgrade your cargo ship, you transfer cargo and get bigger and better cargo ships, and grow your cargo shipping company more and more as part of the gameplay. And I guess that's an example of how each DLC/expansion is going to have a completely different look and feel to the last one. And we're quite keen for each of those expansions to be completely unique with a completely different feel and a focus. If I was to liken it to sci-fi, I would say DLC 2 is going to be more like Star Wars, and DLC 3 is going to be more like Firefly. Mark Tav asks, while on foot, will you be able to go to a shuttle bay and pilot a shuttle out of the ship? Yes, that is the only way, in fact, that you will get from the ship to anywhere else. So be it stations, planetary surfaces, you'll need to physically walk down to the shuttle bay and get in a shuttle. In terms of on-foot repairs, everything internally will be repairable on foot. Floors, wall panels, pipes, cables, individual components of machinery, all of that will be repairable on foot. There will be a repair tool for you wave in front of it to repair things for the most part. We'll work on that more over time. Version 1 is going to be a wavy repair tool. If the thing is too broken, then the wavy repair tool won't work anymore, and then you'll have to remove the broken object, go to a 3D printer, print out a replacement object, and then physically carry that back and install it in the location that you've just removed the broken thing from. Obviously, wavy repair tool isn't the final solution that I'm envisioning for this, but I think it will be the first implementation of it. In terms of the outer hull, we'll have weapons turrets and sensor arrays and things, and the hull plating itself. I'm quite keen that you'll need to EVA on the outer hull to repair things like sensors. So, like this spinny dish up here, that particular spinny dish is the GPS system. So that's how the ship knows where it is in space. So if you break the spinny dish, then the ship no longer knows where it is. So on the sensors, like if you were to go into the galactic positioning mode, it would no longer work. The ship will say like no data or unable to establish a log because the spinny dish is broken. So you would need to go out and do an EVA. In fact, if I go and borrow a... Sorry, Steve. Borrow a little drone camera a minute. Coming through. If we have a look out here, you'll see that there's some very Roblox style steps stuck to the edge of the ship, which is just a placeholder, obviously. But that will actually be a proper gantry with proper steps. So your EVA out of the airlock, walk up what will be a nice set of steps, and then walk over to this Roblox spinny dish and repair it. And that will be the same for anything on the outer hull, including, I suppose, if we fly over as it's there. So, in a rather mental way, each one of these is an individual FTL coil. And if I fly around here a minute, why would I choose the side of the ship that's in darkness? That's just stupid. Hang on. Doop-be-doop-be-doo. I really need to speed up these little camera drones. Right, so if we come over to this side of the coils, each one of these is an individual field coil, and they are actually all physically separate objects in the game. So every one of these copper-looking coils is an actual separate actor, and that has its own health value, its own efficiency, and all that sort of stuff. So we'll probably make it so that the strength of your FTL field is the sum of the condition of all of your coils. So you could probably lose a lot of coils and still be able to achieve FTL, but not as quickly. And obviously we're right out here, so we will have a little repair craft, a little utility vehicle with some grabby arms on it, which you fly out and initiate repairs to these things. How close can we get? Can we get inside? Oh, no, can't quite get in there. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's a little headache inducing. Yeah, so all the stuff on the outer hull will be fixable. Same for these hull plating panels here. So every single one of these hull panels has a health and efficiency value and an armor reduction value, and if that hull plating is destroyed, it will be visibly broken, and you'll need to come out in the utility craft and physically repair that piece of hull plating, because that's what will determine how much damage is taken if you get hit in that exact location. Yes, Chris. Actually, I happen to really, really, really love Stargate Universe, and I would love to make our 4th DLC kind of loosely inspired by Stargate Universe, where you have an old, decrepit, failing alien ship that you have had to board because your own ship was destroyed in some way, and then that DLC is all about getting that decrepit alien ship back home to Earth in one piece to save yourself and your crew. Okay, so it looks like I am being told to stop doing this and go eat something, which is probably good advice. In fact, have I even eaten today? It's been so much of a whirlwind today. I think all I've actually eaten today is 2 buttered crumpets with a cup of tea, and that's probably an extremely British sentence. But yes, I had a cup of tea and 2 buttered crumpets for my breakfast, and that's all I've had. Let's finish off by having another look here. Amazeballs. Oh, my cat just launched itself at me. Okay, I can never end streams. I'm terrible at ending them. So I shall just finish by saying thank you everyone for everything you've done on Kickstarter. Sincerely, it's just so amazing that we've got so funded already. It's just amazing. So thank you. And let's keep that momentum going, because that's just so cool. And my next stream will be on Sunday at 8 PM UTC. I tend to stream every Sunday now and every Wednesday at 8 PM UTC, so if you like listening to me waffle on, then be there. It's usually I'm actually working and doing development work, although today's been a bit different, obviously, with just so many questions, which honestly has been great. Thank you for the questions, because this game does have a really wide scope and there are a lot of questions to answer, and we can't put all the information on Kickstarter because we'd have like a Kickstarter page which is infinitely long. So yes, do keep asking questions, and if you still have questions, please come to our Discord. We chat there all the time. We spend all day every day on Discord chatting to people, so yeah, do get involved in the community. That would be awesome. I'm now going to go and have a drink because my mouth is completely dry, and I'm going to go and eat a kebab, and then I'm going to have a nice hot shower. So that's my plan for the evening. Thanks again, everyone, and I shall see you on the next stream.